to agree that it's certainly a risk from a financial standpoint. And I'm very interested to see what happens to Fox News from this point on, whether it be, the visions, according to certain published reports, are that Fox News is going to be more like Sky News and take more of a global perspective rather than being about America's news source or America's news headquarters, as they like to say. It's very interesting to see what's going to happen here and whether the gambit is worth it or not. I'll keep watching for a little bit, but I'll tell you right now, Fox, if I don't like what I'm seeing, I got alternatives. And I'm not just talking about Blaze or Newsmax or One American News and all the other burgeoning conservative-leaning media out there. I'm talking about the internet. I'm talking about social media. I'm talking about, primary source material that I have more access to now than I've ever had in my life or in pretty much in anyone's lifetime. The days of, the cable news network is waning, folks, in my opinion. I think most people are going to start getting their news, if they haven't already, from social media, from, places that share their viewpoints and their own little echo chambers, things like that, blogs and little politainment shows like this here show. We're going to see a lot of that, I think. And I think we're going to see the transition to local, not so much local, but in this case, local media, meaning locally accessible to the person on demand. You see Conservative Review doing that already with their internet TV channels and things like that. That turn is coming, and you're going to see it, I think, really ramp up in the near future. So that's just my little aside about, the state of media and not going so much into the hysterics of it. But man, can that Tucker Carlson just, jump in people's graves, man. Good for him, though. I like his style. Folks, we're just about out of time here. Time for a final thought, and I'm going to take a local for my final thought this week. In this year's campaign cycle in the People's Republic of New York City, we are seeing kind of a redux of Bill de Blasio's main point that I guess got him elected 4 years ago, 3.5 years ago, whatever it may be. That being universal pre-K was one of the big talking points that he pushed for and he was able to get. Well, now he's looking to take it a step further to create a pre-kindergarten universal class for 3-year-olds. Now, listen, I'm all for education, but come on, folks. When are we going to let kids be kids at all anymore? Are we going to let anyone have a childhood anymore? More importantly, are you going to let government potty train your kids? 3 years old is pushing it. I mean, if you want to take them to a library school or some sort of, daycare, okay. If you want to have government-sponsored daycare for low-income families, okay, I can see that. But to take that whole idea of daycare and putting it under the guise of education is just pandering now for politics. Bill de Blasio isn't looking to do anything other than push a liberal agenda. And by grabbing hold of your kids a little quicker and making you just that much more dependent upon government, he's furthering that agenda. Wake up, folks, in New York City. I know I abandoned you and moved outside to Long Island, but come on already. How many times are you going to get fooled before you actually wake up? Folks, it's so exasperating to see that the wool is being pulled over people's eyes again. I'm sorry, but, and like I said, education and educating our children is a good thing. And yes, I know that there are studies out there that say the earlier you start education, the better off a child is. But this isn't education. This is babysitting. Think about a 3-year-old. My nephew is going to be turning 6 this year, so I'm not so far removed from that. He grew up in the house. We're raising him as a family together. My sister, myself, my mother, and I like to think we're doing a pretty good job of it. But when he was 3 years old, it would have taken wild horses to tear me away from him, to leave him for hours on end in the hands of a stranger in an unfamiliar setting, I just couldn't see, shirking that responsibility. Because when it comes down to it, if he didn't have his family around him, he wouldn't have been allowed to grow and explore the way that he would want to and the way we would like him to. Put him into an institutionalized setting at age 3 and not preparing him for what was to come. I mean, I don't want to even think about it. And yes, I understand the need for low-income people to have the time on their hands to not only work, but to have their children taken care of. But then again, I say call it what it is. Public babysitting. Don't guise it as education. Don't try to pull the wool over my eyes. Say what it is. It's a low-income subsidy for childcare under the guise of the Department of Education. Ladies and gentlemen in the People's Republic of New York, wake up already. You got options out there. You're going to have at least 4 Republicans running that I know of right now. You're going to have probably some Democrats coming out of the woodwork. Who knows? But don't just keep putting your vote towards the same backward liberal policies that this nation rejected. Time to wake up, New York City. And that's my final thought. I want to thank everybody for listening to the show. I want to thank you for listening to my ramblings. We did a lot more rambling this week than we normally do. Next week, we got some great guests coming on the show. We got Bob Dvorak, a real life war correspondent, folks. Bob has been there and done that. He's been embedded with the military overseas. We'll be talking some foreign policy with him, and we'll be continuing the discussion of the craziness on college campuses, and in this time talking about, again, the idea that, males on campus have less and less rights and are being prosecuted and persecuted in greater numbers. We're going to have an attorney on the show tell us about the efforts that she's doing to protect young men on college campuses from these crazy kangaroo courts we've talked about and from unfounded allegations of sexual misconduct and all these things. Let me tell you, folks, that's going to be an interview you don't want to miss. It's going to be, it's going to be fiery. I'm going to guarantee you that much. But until next week, when we will also have Russ Gallo back on the show, and maybe a few more surprises, it's time to shut this sucker down. I want to thank everybody for listening to the show, and I want to thank you for tuning in. However you're tuning in, check us out, as always, at www.behindenemylinesradio.us. One of these days I'll get to say it right. But until that day comes, from the People's Republic of New York City, Gene Baradelli, Behind Enemy Lines, we are out of here. Good night, folks.
Our position's been compromised. It's time to roll out. Report for debriefing at www.behindenemylinesradio.us and look for regular communications via Facebook and Twitter at BEL_radio. You are the resistance. Behind Enemy Lines. A rock radio production. Copyright 2016. Back in 7 days. Out.